Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 gubernatorial elections map. After we got these key primaries in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Texas, all that stuff figured out, so we're going to get right into it. But first, we have to just take a look briefly at this post I made yesterday. So, I'm doing a project where I'm mapping out every congressional district. I was going to preview the map, but then I decided not to because I wanted to save it for later. But we've got a little under a quarter of districts covered both here and on Twitter, so go respond, drop your district below here. I'm hearting everyone just so I can keep track of it, but yeah, let's do that. Let's try to get as many districts as we can, and I'll add them up to see whether we have more Democratic districts or Republican districts, but yeah, sounds good. So we're going to get right into it here. We're going to fill out the states, just the safe blue states here. Colorado moving to safe, just the Democrats have done so well in registration there, and they're doing everything right there. I think Colorado's just trending blue so quickly that it's enough anyways. New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, you could all make an argument for likely, but I'll put them as safe. Massachusetts and Maryland have Republican incumbents that aren't running again. New York, there's been some decently tight polling, but Hochul will still win by, I think, upwards of 15. And that's it for the Democrats for their safe seats. Republicans have got a bit more, just the normal safe Republican seats. Texas, so if we're doing probability here, Texas would be safe. If we're doing margins, likely, but I'll put it as likely because I don't really want to talk about it. Beta's going to lose by 12 or something like that. It won't be close. Same with Iowa and Ohio. They're likely by margin, safe by probability. But I think Iowa's actually going to vote to the left of Ohio, so I'll put Ohio as safe to be generous to the GOP because the Democrats are going to pull out here and it's just going to crash for them. I know a lot of Democrats like Nan Whaley, but the Democrats are just there's no point in the Democratic Party as a whole spending money in Ohio when they're going to lose it by 10 no matter what. So Ohio, I think, is safe Republican. And then as for Iowa, I think I was a little closer because the Seltzer poll we saw only had Reynolds up by 8, and I think that's going to be kind of similar because Iowa's a little less, it fluctuates a little less, and having Grassley on the ballot really helps the GOP, but at the same time, I think there will be some level of ticket splitting, and that's enough to make me think that the GOP wins it by downwards of 15. Ohio could be a 14-point victory for the Republicans. It's just that it's probably around 15. I was probably closer to 10 or 11. So that's why they're different, but they're both very solid for the GOP. I'd be stunned. I'd quit YouTube if the GOP lost either of these. As of right now. South Carolina's safe. Cunningham is going to lose by 15. I mean, likely maybe, but I'll just put it as safe. And then Vermont, Massachusetts, because they have popular incumbents running for the GOP. So the Republicans are already at 22 seats. They're really close to that 25 mark and 26 for outright majority here. But let's see who we can go next. So Oregon, I think, is likely. So if you look at the primaries that we saw in Oregon, so obviously Ron Wyden did very well. And the Democrats had much better turnout in their primaries than the Republicans, which is actually interesting because the Republicans actually had a contested primary. The Democrats did not, obviously. And a week later, we still haven't seen the call for the GOP primary. But in the gubernatorial primaries, Tina Kotek beat Tobias Reed out here for the Democrats, and for the GOP, Christine Drazen, who I think is the minority leader of the state senator, state house in Oregon, ranking Republican, narrowly won her primary. And then I cannot believe that we still haven't gotten a call out of this primary between Jamie McLeod Skinner and conservative Democrat Kurt Schrader. It's just unbelievable to me that it's taking this long to count those votes. But anyways, so Drazen versus Kotek is a pretty favorable matchup for Democrats because for them to lose this race, they need to have a fundamentally unpopular candidate or incumbent, which they have neither. So I think it's likely. I think that's the fair rating for now. I think Illinois is also likely. Minnesota is close, but I won't put it in likely yet. And then Rhode Island, Connecticut are also likely, but I don't really have an interest in talking about these latter three states because they're all going to be Democratic wins by 10, 13%. For the GOP, they win, typical states, typical suspects, Alaska, Florida. That's it for those states. And Kansas, too. But Kansas is actually worth talking about because there's an incumbent Democrat there. So Laura Kelly beat Chris Kobach by about 5% in 2018. And Kelly did this because A, it was a blue wave, so she was helped out by that general swing towards Democrats. And B, Kobach was the worst candidate the GOP could have run. he was in a bad situation too, with there being a blue wave, and the incumbent Republican administration under Sam Brownback was really unpopular in Kansas, even among Republicans. So there was the sentiment of electing a Democratic governor in Kansas, and on top of that, Chris Kobach was known for being extremely right-wing, and he was accused of conducting voter suppression during his time as Secretary of State. He was known, just as being a very extreme Republican, and that really alienated a lot of suburban, typical Republican voters who voted for Kelly. And Kelly won with a plurality. She only got about 48% of the vote, and Kobach ended up losing that race. That was quite winnable for him, actually, but he lost it. So, Kansas, I think, flips, though. Kelly doesn't. She's not unpopular, but she's just a Democrat in a red state. I just think she'll be ostracized at this point. It's not personal. It's just that Kansas is a red state that's in a red wave is going to reelect, or is going to send a Republican to Topeka. So that's it. Florida, obviously, Chris versus DeSantis is a DeSantis plus 6-7 margin. If it's Nikki Fried, I could see DeSantis winning by 10, but it's likely no matter what. I think that's it for that. GOP already at 25. They're going to get really close here. But we've got our lean Democratic states up next. So I think New Mexico's lean Democrat. So for those of you who don't know, New Mexico would generally be likely at most races, the Democrats. But Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's the Democratic incumbent, has a scandal, which I'm not going to get into it here for monetization reasons, but she allegedly groped a staffer, and if these I'm pretty sure they're true because she already paid it off. She tried to dismiss it. If these accusations are 100% true, then you're an awful person and you shouldn't be running for governor. So, not a fan of Michelle Lujan Grisham. But yeah, she's gonna face some difficulties here. I might move it down to toss up, even tilt Republican because the thing is, she hasn't actually gotten a ton of press for this, and the polling we've seen out of New Mexico has been pretty good for Democrats anyways. So if it's summer and nothing's happening with Ronchetti, then I think we could see this race moving back to likely D. But I think lean D's, it's kind of just our waiting period, right? Democrats are still favored here because it's a blue state. Democrats will be doing well here otherwise, but it's just Michelle Lujan Grisham has the potential to fall. We'll have to see what Ronchetti does. We'll have to see how this campaign unfolds, because we don't know yet. It's only spring. We don't know what the narrative of this campaign is going to be, and we'll have to see that. So for that reason, I think New Mexico, lean Democrat, but that's a rating that's going to change at some point. It could go in either direction. Next up, we've got Minnesota. Minnesota, I think, is quite a good race for Democrats this time around, because Tim Walz is the incumbent, and he is someone who is quite popular within his state. The polling we've seen has had him up by pretty substantial amounts. We don't have a ton of polling, but it indicates that he'll win by, high single digits. And I don't think he'll win by 7 or 8, but I think he'll win by, 4 or 5, so he'll do okay. And I don't see the GOP really, because the GOP want to gain seats at the gubernatorial level, and they want to hold their seats. So they want to hold Arizona and Georgia. Those are the big two. But they also want to be able to flip the Rust Belt. And they want to flip Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. They want to try to see what they can do in New Mexico, see if they can, maybe even Oregon. There's been talk about putting in play, Maine with Paul LePage. So, they've got a lot of chances at races that, that they can win, right? But Minnesota, I just see, Minnesota, they might kind of view as one of the worst of their options, because look, they'll prioritize these 7 races ahead of Minnesota for sure. New Mexico, I think they prioritize ahead of Minnesota too, especially if Ronchetti can make some marks against Michelle Lujan Grisham, and they're Kansas too, if they just want to for sure just destroy Kelly there. And then, once you get past that, you're looking at maybe one of these races, which is either between Oregon, Minnesota, or Connecticut, maybe. And I think that they would rather go for Oregon there, just based on the trends there. Because in Oregon we saw, it's laughable, but we saw a poll that had Republicans winning in a landslide in this election by 17 points. Now, do not take that poll seriously. It's a complete joke, but, the polling in Oregon is better for Republicans than it is in Minnesota, so... that would be enough. They'll have their own internal polling. They'll figure it out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't really try in Minnesota anyways, because they don't really have a candidate there. So Minnesota, I think, lean Democrat could move to likely if the GOP just don't invest. And then Pennsylvania too. When I said Pennsylvania, was going to be, one of the 7 states. I think tilt's also fair. I'm putting it at lean for now just because I think that when you're looking at a race like Pennsylvania, we don't know what the GOP strategy is going to be here. There are 2 ways this could go. Either we could, because look, the Democrats are going to want to win this race no matter what they're seeing in the polls, because Pennsylvania is very important to them. They like Josh Shapiro. He's one of their best recruits of this cycle, and they're terrified of Doug Mastriano, because Mastriano, the consensus is that he would not allow there to be a free and fair election in Pennsylvania. He'd try to suppress the vote. He would try to give Republicans more votes. That's the consensus. I'm not saying I disagree or agree with that. I'm just saying that's the consensus among most people. The Democrats are terrified of this. And they will, I think, pour their heart and soul into electing Josh Shapiro. The Republicans aren't fully sold on Doug Mastriano. When you look at the statement they put out after he won the primary, it was very like, okay, fine, we'll do it, right? But it was as unenthusiastic as it gets. And they tried to coalesce, they tried to get every other Republican to drop out and endorse Lou Bartlett on the primary, and, it didn't happen, and they were disappointed that they couldn't beat out Mastriano. So, when you look at these races, right, you're seeing the Republicans really scared of running Mastriano and really scared of just trying to work on him winning. And so I think that, that they'll do some internal polls, especially in the months of May and June, and they'll see what they're getting here, right? And just right now, it just, I wouldn't be surprised if they just pull out and just say, no, we want to beat Whitmer, we want to beat Evers, we want to beat LePage, we want to hold on to Arizona and Georgia, we want to try to beat Sisolak, right? They have better opportunities, and if they're just down by 8 in Pennsylvania every time, they don't care about Mastriano. They don't really like him anyways, so I would not be surprised if the GOP pulls out of Pennsylvania, and even if they don't, option B is they go all in, then the race is essentially a toss-up, with Shapiro narrowly being favored. I think Shapiro wins anyways, but lean Democrat for now. Maine, I think, is next. Maine could be tilts. Because the thing is, they elected Susan Collins. They're open to Republicans, and Paul LePage is a former governor, so that gives them a boost. But LePage also wasn't popular, and nor is Janet Mills. I think kind of cancels out. But with Maine being so just with it fluctuating so much between the parties, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes Republican or Democrat easily. The boost the Democrats are getting in northern Maine is that Jared Golden's running there, and he's the best candidate they have. So he will be giving Democrats somewhat of a turnout boost in northern Maine, and he'll get out some Trump voters, and I think that they'll vote for Mills as a result of Golden being on the ballot, because Golden's competitive in that district. He probably loses, but he's still competitive. He still narrows it up a little bit, and if Mills, if Golden does hopefully what he, hopefully the Democrats, if Golden can do his thing in the second district, Democrats can focus on the first, try to get out the vote there, and that's enough for them to win the race anyways. So it's easier said than done, but I think Maine is lean D for now. We'll have to see though. So yeah, I think that's it for the Democrats. For the GOP, they've got a few lean states as well. I think Wisconsin's lean Republican. It's right. It's the definition of lean Republican, right? It is a state that Democratic incumbent, but it's in a red trending state where the Republicans are going to do very well. I'd be surprised if the Democrats win a single statewide office here. I'd be surprised if the Democrats, even win the House popular vote here, because Democrats are going to get wiped out in Wisconsin, and I think that we see Tony Evers as being the best performing Democrat, and that's not saying much because he's still losing by 4 in my predictions. So, with Rebecca Kleefisch isn't a great candidate for the GOP. I actually think she's quite bad. But the national environment is going to be 7, 8, 9% more favorable to Republicans than it was in 2020. Wisconsin already voted to the right of the country in 2020. So when you add that shift, Wisconsin would be quite red. I'm not saying that the Republicans would win it by 10. I think that would be very surprising. But, it just, Tony Evers has a very narrow path, and I just don't think he can do it. He's got a chance, but I just really don't think he's favored, and I think the Democrats are just counting on losing him anyways, so they can, and because of the 3 Rust Belts, or of the 4 if you want to include Minnesota, of the 4 Rust Belt states, Evers definitely has the worst chance objectively for the Democrats, so I think Evers is the odd one out here. Georgia, we don't know yet, because, I'm looking at this on a Tuesday night. And so from what we've seen, the Republicans have totally outpaced Democrats in the early vote. Now, this is expected, and the Democrats have much more votes outstanding than the GOP, and most of them are from, Clayton, DeKalb, Fulton. So these are all going to be, like, the Democrats are going to get at least 750,000 votes. So, like, they have plenty of votes outstanding. And when you, when you look at this, right, like, this was an uncontested primary. It was quite, Warnock was always going to win easily. The Republicans had contested, somewhat contested primaries at both the Senate level and the gubernatorial level with Perdue and Kemp, although, both were quite lopsided anyways, so, we don't really know yet, but, Republicans are going to outpace Democrats, and, again, there are more registered Republicans than Democrats in Georgia, so there are probably lots of Republicans that voted in this primary anyways, especially in the suburbs of Atlanta, because there are lots of registered Republicans who vote Democrat nowadays in northern Georgia, but, we're going to see a total kind of, gap here that I think is exacerbated. Like, I'd be very surprised if the GOP wins the Senate race or governor race by 350,000 votes. That being said, this sign is, this is still on pace the way you'd expect for the GOP in a good year for them. So, I think as a result of that, you're going to get a fairly large, or not fairly large, but a fairly decent Kemp victory that outpaces what we saw in 2018 for him. So, Abrams, she'll get turnout. Like, the Georgia Democrats are very good with turnout, but I just don't think she has it in her to do as well as Biden or Warnock or Ossoff in the 2020-2021 election cycle. What they did in the suburbs, I just don't think it's replicated, especially with someone like Kemp, who is better than Loeffler, Perdue, or Trump in the suburbs. So I think as a result of that, Georgia stays red. I think the GOP wins it by about 3.5%. So then next up, we have the tilt Democratic states, which are the states of Michigan and Nevada. Then, as you can infer, the last one standing is the GOP in Arizona, which I'm moving from lean Republican down to tilt Republican. Actually, no, sorry, that's the Senate race. This is the same. It's tilt Republican. So Michigan, I'm actually flipping from tilt Republican to tilt Democrat, and it could actually go to lean Democrat. So Michigan, I'm getting more optimistic by the day for the Democratic Party here, and this is for a few reasons. So, first of all, the GOP's preferred candidate, James Craig, was going to obviously be the one running here because he was a police chief in Detroit. He was he was a good pick, right? He was their best candidate they could have run here. And he looks like he's not going to even qualify for the ballot, which is a massive, it's the definition of, I won't say it, but F around and find out, right? He didn't take the primary seriously, and as a result of that, he does not have ballot access. I mean, the Republicans are going to be going to the the bottom of the barrel, really, for these candidates, and they're going to be fielding kind of a no-name against Gretchen Whitmer, which is not what you want to see. And, they might pull out of this race, they might not. They might try to get, a court to give Craig another chance, right? We don't know what's going to happen here, but it looks like James Craig will not be the GOP nominee, with a court system being controlled by Democrats, and, it really just not looking good for James Craig right now. And so that, to me, says that I think Whitmer's favored against anyone other than Craig. And, we saw a poll in Michigan that on the surface looked really bad for Democrats because Biden had a 69% disapproval rating. I'm not kidding. You can look it up. Biden had a 69% disapproval rating in Michigan, which is not believable, but whatever. Point being, so the poll was weird because despite the fact that Joe Biden allegedly was 38% underwater in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer was winning re-election. They polled her against a few other candidates. She was winning, but when they polled her against a generic Republican, she was down by a point, which means that, as we see, generic Republican is usually doing better than the Republican candidates because the idea of the Republican Party on paper is generally more appealing to voters than their candidates are because their candidates usually aren't as great as they could be. And so that means that Whitmer can lose. She's vulnerable, but it doesn't mean that she's favored to lose. And secondly, the poll was really weird because it said Biden had a 69% disapproval rating, right? But it factored in the people that said fair into disapproval. So, since 24% of people said fair for 24% of people said fair for Biden. If you give the 24% fair to Biden, it means he'd have a 55% approval rating in Michigan. Or if you cut it in half, it means that Biden's disapproval rating in Michigan would go down from 69% to 57%, which is much more much better for Democrats, obviously. So the poll was really weird. It looked bad on the surface for Democrats, but I think with all that being said, I would fully expect the Republican Party to lose this race by maybe 2%, maybe 3%. I'm on move to lean D in all honesty. I wouldn't be surprised if that has to happen, but for now, I'll put it as tilt out of an abundance of caution. And then in Nevada, when you look at this race, I think Sisolak is going to do quite well in Washoe County. I think he runs ahead of Cortez Masto and runs about even in the Las Vegas suburbs. He does a little worse in the city itself, but I think it's canceled out, and I think he wins by a similar amount. So, and also when you look at like every poll we've seen has Biden approval like low to mid 30s in Nevada, which is not realistic to me. I think Biden's real approval in Nevada is low mid 40s or whatever. Because I think we're seeing a general undersampling of Biden. Because there are a lot of people who say they disapprove of Biden but are going to vote Democrat no matter what. Because there are people who just think he hasn't done enough, or people who just don't like the guy anyways and just voted for him because they hated Trump. Right? There are plenty of Democrats who are like that. Right? And so it's just the effect of when Biden's not running against Trump, he just doesn't look good. So you see that, and Democrats are abandoning Biden, and I get why people wouldn't like Biden, but I it doesn't really matter if he has a 35% disapproval rating. If they're still going to vote for, if a quarter of the people who say they disapprove of Biden are still going to turn out and vote for the Democrats anyways, it doesn't fundamentally mean anything. So, and when you see these polls, it kind of proves that, because Biden will have a 34% approval rating in Nevada, and Sisolak will be up by 4 points, right? It'll just be we hate Biden, we're going to vote for Sisolak. So that to me signals that unless Biden is down horrendous, that misphrasing, unless Biden is polling really bad in Nevada on election day, if we get an exit poll and Biden's proving it's 31% in Nevada, Sisolak's going down. But if it's where I think it is, it's 41, 42%, maybe even 44, 45%, Sisolak probably wins by a point or so. Lastly, we got Arizona. Kari Lake isn't the best GOP nominee here, but Katie Hobbs, from what I've seen, is not running a very impressive campaign. She has a winnable race here, and it doesn't look like she's executing well. So Arizona, I do think, narrowly goes to the GOP. But it's, again, in Nevada, I think are the two closest races, and it really could change. So what you're really looking at here is just a race in which the GOP should not be doing this well, and they are. And once election season hits, we might, because Kari Lake's not a good candidate, we might see the whole her getting exposed for her conspiracy theories and whatnot in the suburbs hurting her. We just have to see where it's similar to a state like New Mexico. I'm giving the incumbent party the benefit of the doubt here, right? But we'll have to see what happens, because both these candidates have historically bad downside for their parties in New Mexico and Arizona. So Arizona still Republican for now, but it could change. So I think that's it. 22 for the Democrats, a net loss of 2. They're losing control of Wisconsin, and they're losing control of Kansas, but they're gaining in Massachusetts and Maryland. And then I think I also have them losing control over the actually that's it. I think that's it. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you all in the next video. Bye.